My dear, that's a big brain you have. Where'd you get that brain? Was it from
Are you talking to me?
Morbius?
I.
Well, you are dear, aren't you?
You think I have a big brain? Oh, I have something. I have bad news for you.
Oh no! What?
It's almost like my brain.
It's the Brain of Morbius. That's what. It's oh my god! It's the Brain of Morbius. Episode 84. Oh god! What the fuck is Morbius, and why does he have a brain, dear?
You want to find out?
I want to find out.
I mean,
I want to know if you actually wrote down what he is.
I mean, he's a criminal that assaulted, I believe, the Time Lords way back when. And they basically, like, tore him apart and sent him to all ends of the universe.
Kinda.
Right.
You can explain what happened in the episode, though.
How is that not right? Okay. Also, he's a walking testicle.
Well, I said it's
anyway,
kind of right.
We see a bug walking around. Totally not a human. It's a bug. And we also see a man with the hook hand car door who I think kills the bug. Cut to the man with the bad haircut who's sculpting, and hook door, hand car door, comes in with the bug's head. And the man's like, protect the skull, we need it, for some reason. And then the TARDIS shows up, and the Doctor's angry, and someone's fucking with the TARDIS and it's off course, and he thinks it's the Time Lords. Sarah thinks it's the TARDIS. So the Doctor has a seat, and Sarah goes to look at something off screen. It's apparently an ejection bubble / space parachute. Also, they look and find a fuck ton of spaceships and some dead bodies. Doctor doesn't really care, likes his yo-yo, but when Sarah finds the dead body and screams, he's like, oh, I'm gonna go over there now. Everybody's dead after the crash, right? And the Doctor realizes that actually he's been around here before. And they see a building in the distance, and then it rains. Cut to a woman for like half a second, and then cut to a man experimenting on the bug head. And lights go out, and we gotta ask Igor to get the lights. Cut back to a group of women who are very angry and confused how there are people here. And they also have the elixir of life, by the way, just so you know. Also, the flame of life, which makes the elixir of life, is dying. It's been dying for a while. And with it, the elixir's going as well. Also, they share the elixir with the Time Lords, by the way, so everything is going to shit. Igor has been looking for his arm that has been taken from him, which was taken by Franken Badcut, and then the Doctor is at the door, and the Frankenstein is excited that humans are here, but please take wine and food and warm, Doctor. And the Doctor's like, hi, I recognize that head. And Frankenstein is like, no, he's not that guy. Don't worry about it. Also, dude, there's this headless body down here, so like, what's up with that? And then Igor brings up some food, and they ask about the arm, and he lies about the arm. Back at the ladies, they're chanting about fire, and a pendant shows them that the TARDIS is on the planet. Now they're going to use their power to bring the TARDIS here while chanting more about fire. Praise the sun. Now, everyone thinks that the Doctor is here to steal the elixir. The Doctor is on their level of mind power, though, so they can't fight him, really. The Doctor brings up the cult of Mobius, and Sarah almost gets killed for a second. And then the fire ladies are all watching the Doctor and Sarah, who is not drinking. Sarah is not drinking the wine secretly. While Wind does some stuff in the room and blows things around. He goes, it's the fire ladies, and Frankenstein is like, the fuck? You know about that? And then he recognizes that head was a Time Lord and freaks out because it's Mobius, and passes out. Sarah fake passes out, and then they really want to steal the Doctor's head and murder Sarah, but he's like, take the fucking Doctor, don't kill Sarah right now, this is more important. Sarah then just wakes up and runs off. We can't operate like this, says Frankenstein, and we need a light, so go repair the generators first. But then the fire ladies teleport to the Doctor's body, like, away, and Sarah's, like, sneaking around, finds a blanket that's moving. It's really weird, and it really actually just honestly looks like a headless testicle, and that's, yeah.
Yeah, it does look a bit like a testicle.
Yes, it does.
It's not the most phallic of the Doctor Who gets.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, it's not as phallic as it can be. So the Brain of Morbius, Mobius, Morbius.
Mobius strip.
important episode. Very important episode for a lot of reasons. Some lore, some just creative and production-wise. One of my favorite little production notes about this is that due to the low budget, they could only afford one professional dancer. So in the scenes where there's like dancing around stuff, there's only one professional dancer, and then the rest is just copying her and just basically they were like, okay, we can only find one dancer. The rest will just find actresses that have danced before. So it won't be too hard for them. So the plot of this episode kicks off technically when a religious fanatic looks up and makes eye contact with the Doctor and becomes infatuated with his face. This is peculiarly simple. Oh my god, my brain is not connecting words to brain right now. This is similar to a formative experience that Tom Baker recounts in his autobiography, where as a monk forbidden to look at faces, he'd accidentally glance up to see another novice and become infatuated with his face. Which, I mean, if it's the sort of thing of like, you are forbidden to look at people, it's the sort of thing of like, if you accidentally look at someone, it's like, oh my god, that's what a person looks like? Holy shit, this is so weird.
I mean, yeah, I can see that.
I can understand. Immediately, some of you, even if you're just listening, will probably be able to pick up on the fact that this episode is very much a homage to Frankenstein. Both the scientist and the monster. It gets a little bit more literal later on, which is funny because Mary Shelley herself shows up technically twice within Doctor Who. Once as a companion of the 8th Doctor who travels with him, and the other in the actual TV series with the 13th Doctor in one of the only good 13th Doctor episodes. Whoops. Oh, we're not there yet. We actually figured out we're not going to get to the new series of Doctor Who until like March of 2023. So good luck getting there in time. But that's the 60th anniversary, so hey, there's some stuff planned. There's a movie apparently. Well, a special, I guess, is better accurate. But yes, a lot of stuff on the production was also simply spray painted, which we notice very clearly with the chamber to the sacred flame. For the Sisterhood of Khan. Also, other things that were spray painted include like the little decorative stuff that's on Marin's costume. Like, they were basically just like plastic spoons that were spray painted gold, which once you've known that, you look at it and it's pretty fucking funny. Anyway, what happens in the next part, dear?
Well, Sarah runs away, and Frankenstein? How would you like me to pronounce it?
Soren?
Frank and Igor come in and realize what's happening and want to know where the Doctor is. Frank is pissy at everyone, and he's got to get the Doctor back. Sarah, of course, overhears this conversation, sneaks out. Doctor's with the sisters, very confused, but now he's at flame knife point. And when I say flame knife point, I mean their knives are shaped like flames. The Doctor doesn't really know
Isn't that the name of that character from Undertale?
Flame
Knife Point?
Flame Knife Point? Yeah, I think so.
The one that's in the tavern? Yeah.
Yeah, Flame Knife Point. Yeah. He doesn't really know if the Time Lord's got him here, but then he realizes that he's being killed soon, so that sucks. He has no clue about the elixir of life, realizes that Morbius was sort of there. He felt his mind touch his, so he thinks he's alive, and the elders are like, stop being a shit, bro. I'm really old. Stop. Frank and Igor are wondering what the sisters are doing, how to save the Doctor's head. Doctor gets angry, saying, hey, we helped you. Why do you hate the Time Lords? And then they tell him about, like, the flame of life. It's a subterranean thing, though, so it shouldn't go out anytime soon. But then it's summarized, so it's time to die. They do a fire dance. Frank and Igor Igor listen and can't rush in to stop it, but they rush in anyway. Frank comes in and the girls go, wow, you should die. Igor gets ring attacked, and then Frank asks for the doctor's head, and they go, fuck off, we know what you're up to. While Sarah nearby cuts the rope of the doctor so he could escape. So now to kill the doctor, and they set all the sticks on fire, and Sarah escapes with the doctor. Frank and Igor go home and have a hissy fit, making Igor think he nearly killed Frank, so he offers to give him back his arm in order to survive, because again, he took his arm. The doctor and Sarah have gotten out, but Sarah is having trouble seeing right now for some reason. Cut to Morbius berating Frank for not doing good enough from his testicle body /
You're
brain
never
in a
good
jar.
enough to do good.
You're not as good as your brother. You could have been as good as your brother.
Your cousin would have found me a body.
Your cousin would have been married by now and found me a body. What is this? I got 5 grandchildren on the other side, and you got
your
nothing.
Your cousin's doing amazing.
Your cousin's a doctor. Anyway. So,
I heard your cousin discovered a new science.
A new science. God damn. So... he offers to give him back his arm in order to survive. Doctor and Sarah have gotten out. Sarah's having trouble seeing. Morbius is berating Frank. Igor is upset about the fact that the doctor and Sarah came back. Frank is like, oh, and yes, I literally wrote like, oh face emoji. The doctor wants Frank to examine Sarah's eyes, so they need to go to the lab. In the lab, the doctor
imagine Sarah's eyes.
Yes, and sees the testicles for a minute, and they escort Sarah away, and they go, hey, she's completely blind, her eyes are fucked up, you'd need the elixir of life. And while being left alone, Sarah hears the weird voice of some guy downstairs, Morbius. Sarah has to come down here and, like, can't see anything, and she's touching stuff, and she finds a brain in a jar while it screams at her. That's it. That's literally it.
Brain in a jar. We've never seen that before in Doctor Who.
Never.
So, this
very
story,
original.
As we've stated, Frankenstein. But
Frankenstein.
this story went through a lot of phases of what it actually was. So initially, Terrence Dix, as if you remember, the script editor for the previous era, he originally wrote the story, and the original concept of it was meant to be an inversion of Frankenstein, in which the creature's creator would be the inhuman monster, sorry, and the final form of Morbius would be a perfect human. And, the scientist is an alien, and the monster is human. Like that Twilight Zone episode, basically. Spoilers, but... however, they judged it to be impractical, often mainly for economical reasons. Though it's got to be said that a story in which the monsters revealed at the start of episode 1 and the thing created in the lab turns out to be an ordinary-looking human is a bit of a non-start, dramatically speaking. I kind of disagree. I feel like you could have done something interesting with it. I mean, the Twilight Zone did. Spoilers, again.
Would it surprise you to know that I actually prefer the Twilight Zone over this?
They're completely different things.
Okay. Well, I'm just saying, like, science fiction, science fantasy style writing.
Well, that's kind of the difference. Like, the Twilight Zone is a horror short vignette with sci-fi elements. Some heavily focus on sci-fi, and some were written direct, like especially the 60s ones were written by actual sci-fi writers, if I remember right. But this is more childhood family adventure with morals in a science fiction setting. Like because remember, the original premise of the entire show was an old guy traveling around with some kids, and like they go to like the past and teach kids about history, that sort of thing.
Yeah,
like it meant to be sort of educational, and that could have sort of evolved to, well, it's actually better to just do something that's entertaining, and it's sort of like, okay, well, you get to certain areas where people are like, okay, well, to be entertaining, I want to scare people, or like I want to have messages with stuff stick with people. Like, whereas the Twilight Zone is all about sort of messaging. Like, the entire point of the stories is that they have tight, short stories that are self-contained and are entirely about, like, timely messages, essentially, and also just, some great horror shorts. I've never seen the 80s version of the Twilight Zone, and I've barely seen any of the modern Twilight Zone, the Jordan Peele one. I've heard not too many good things about it. I've heard it is too direct, and it takes the idea of subtlety and throws it out the window. Which, with something like science fiction and horror, you don't really want to get rid of subtlety because it makes it boring. But yeah, anyway, as script editor for the current era, Robert Holmes stepped in to drastically restructure the script, even though Terrence Dicks was really pissed off that he did. During an angry telephone conversation, Dicks disowned the story and told Holmes to broadcast it under some bland pseudonym. The legend holds that when the story was shown and Dicks saw the name Holmes that had chosen, he burst out laughing and therefore made his peace. If you don't know what name he chose, the name he chose was Robin Bland. So I was like, I don't know, make my name, I don't know, just something bland or like, oh, fucking whatever. I was like, oh, okay, he literally took it literally.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, that's good. Another thing also is this was one of the only, if not the only, I think, shot episode for the year of the series that was studio bound only. There was no on location shots. There was no film outside of a studio. It was all studio, maybe back to the very early 60s with that. Which the director was like, come on, what? No. But they kind of had to do it because the low budget, and also they didn't really have much lead-in time, especially with the whole script being completely rewritten, essentially. Philip Hinchcliffe left the production unit manager in charge while he went on holiday like a week later, and then a whole heap of people went off to like go on different things, so it was like no one was really around to like give them time. So I was like, oh god, we have like 36 days to do everything now, and it's like, this is not enough to have like on location, so it's all studio sets. But yes, this the intention of Frankenstein, but in reverse, flipped on its head, was the entire point of this. But it got turned into something that very much stands in contrast with other episodes of Doctor Who, some of which we've actually seen, and serve as like a really good example of telling a similar story, or a story with similar elements to a previous story, but it's kind of updated for the new era, in a sense. I'll talk about it a bit more in the next part, though. What happened in the next part, dear?
Well, Shara gets shoved out of the room, and Frank goes, please listen, we gotta use this head. We really need to do it, and the brain's just very angry. But the doctor is being sent into a trap, and Sarah now knows that, and locks Frank in with the brain. Cut to the Fire Sisters drinking what's left of the elixir. Frank has sent a letter saying the doctor is headed this way. Somehow it gets there before Sarah. Sarah and the doctor nearly walks off a cliff. Sarah nearly walks a cliff trying to help the doctor. Doctor asks for the elixir, explains, and realizes that Sarah is actually going to recover. But then why the fuck is the doctor here if not to steal the fucking elixir? We re-mention Morbius, and we reiterate how bad he is and how he is very, 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 very dead. And then the doctor also mentions that the crashed spaceships and stuff, but the girls seem to know nothing about it. Too bad Sarah is caught by Hookhand Igor, who realizes she's pretty and doesn't want to kill her. So the doctor wants to help the fire girls with their flame problem, but when they check on it, it's even lower. And then the doctor mentions that immortality fucks people up, and how nothing can make progress if you don't die. So he lights a firecracker, throws it in, kills the flame. So it's time for him to die again, but then suddenly, the flame is huge again, and there was an explosion, and it was fixed, and it was just a whole lot of soot, apparently. Sarah gets Shibari tied up while Frank gets angry about the testicle. That's a quote out of context that is fantastic, in my opinion.
Do you remember the context?
No.
Okay, so, again, just like last episode, we're kind of recording the commentary and the episode a week apart because Dear had to vomit again.
Yeah.
So, I'll pick up because I remember what happens. So Dia says that Sarah's Shibari tied up. We said that because she's strapped to a table, and the way she's strapped to a table is using rope, and it's like small, thin rope, and there's two lines of it around her, and which is like basically like it looks like Shibari rope, and like the way that someone would tie it around someone. And the thing is, she's still blind, and Frankenstein, okay, we'll just keep calling him Frankenstein, is like, hey, stay here, essentially, like, you're gonna help me, and just in the corner of the room is, the brain and the new body.
Okay, so...
Because he's like, I need your help, because, wait,
we're about to get
kill
there.
his assistant?
We're about to get there.
Okay. Spoilers for the next 2 seconds.
So we cut Sarah free from her Shibari because she's going to be forced to help with surgery. Igor is running through the halls. The sisters are marching on. And the surgery went well, probably, because it moves when stimulated. The brain wakes up, and Frank finds the doctor's body left in his kitchen, while Sarah is being snuck up behind by the testicle. And that there you go. That's that whole... There you go. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So. Sorry, I'm just laughing about the fucking concept of Sarah just in Shibari and like everyone walking in just like, I'm sorry, what's going on here?
Yeah.
But few things. First of all, Cynthia Grenville, who played Marin, the leader of the bunch, the Sisterhood of Khan, said that in an interview that Tom Baker nearly got set on fire during the stunt where he was meant to be not when he's throwing the soot, the getting rid of the soot in the fire essentially, but when he's tied up to a funeral pyre, and it's meant to be set alight. The BBC effects department heavily fireproofed everything in the pyre, but the flames shot up in a massive columns instead of creeping around in a circle around the doctor's feet like they were supposed to. You can hear it in the episode. If she hadn't broken character and yelled at Tom to jump until he did, he would have seriously been injured. Like, he would have been fucking burned.
Yeah.
The fire brigade had to be called in between takes. If you watch the sequence, you'll notice later shots of the pyre are less fiery than longer, earlier shots of the Doctor on it. Especially shots that like feature close-ups of him. Which, that considering their time constraint to do all of this, it makes a lot of sense that they nearly had an accident that would have killed their fucking lead actor.
Mm-hmm.
Which, you don't want to do that most of the time.
Most of the time.
Most of the time. So, anyway, this episode, a lot of it comes from the fear of, like, hybridity, that sort of thing. Morbius has acquired a body made of parts of other beings. Why is this horrible? Because it crosses our boundaries of the self, especially at the time. We sort of brought up the effects of 70s body horror in The Ark in Space, if you remember that one, dear, the one with the Wirren. The giant space bugs that slithered around, and if you got touched or attacked by one of them, you would slowly... Well, you wouldn't turn into it. What would happen is it laid eggs in you, and then its larvae hatched and would eat you from the inside and absorb your memories and everything about you. Which is horrifying and is, classic body horror type shit.
Yeah.
So we've already explored that sort of thing. This one is a lot more about kind of updating Frankenstein in a way, because the original readers of Frankenstein didn't live in a world where organ transplants were really a palpable issue. But in this era, transplants were more an actual thing. So it's like, if Ark in Space was like a story with using body horror that's kind of the prelude to Alien, then this episode, in that sense, is sort of using body horror as a prelude to, like, all of the medical horror dramas of, like, the 70s and 80s. Like, your sort of Coma, like, that sort of thing of, like, stark terror, where, like, the horror comes from, like, medical science is terrifying, and the human body is a mystery and terrifying.
Human
like
body
that sort of thing
dumb.
of like things can go wrong.
Gonna be real.
But yeah, it's also the sort of thing of like possession of the body by someone else's mind is like kind of bad in Doctor Who terms. So a body to be made possessed by someone else is like, you know, someone who's been disembodied is also somehow wrong. But that comes into question. However, the most egregious thing that the episode kind of holds on is the crossing over from animal to human. There were whole lines in episode 1 that are completely lifted from H.G. Wells' The Island of Dr. Moreau, which most will probably remember as that one really good Treehouse of Horror episode in The Simpsons where where Dr. Hibbert changes everyone into animals. It's a really good one. I like that one. Anyway, admittedly, the lines in which Solon reflects are a contempt of his peers, but it shows that someone had been doing, you know, research and reading of what to do. Hybrid and hubris both come from the Greek word of crossing over, going too far. Humanity, in this program's scheme of things, means that people who look like us behave like us, unless, you know, otherwise stated. Like, people, if they look like us, they act like us. You know, they don't tend to break from that. Morbius wasn't human to begin with, but a Time Lord, presumably brought up to expect a change of form. So he's like, for him, it's not unnatural to be like, fuck it, give me a pig arm. Fuck it, if I need a body, anything you got, give me, Doc. I'll take hook-haired Cardor.
Hell yeah.
But yeah, a little bit of more backstory on Morbius. He is essentially like, let's explain a bit about Gallifreyan society, shall we? Okay, so within Gallifrey and within Time Lords, you have your interventionists and your non-interventionists. They're kind of the two groups that we're focusing on with this. The interventionists are the kind who are like, listen, we have this power over time and space. We should intervene in events to change things for the better. And you have non-interventionists who are like, what the fuck are you talking about? If we intervene and change time for the better, like, who's to say that what we change is better or worse than things that already are? What we should do instead is just maintain the web of time and maintain things the way they are. We should not seek to change time. We should seek to keep time and protect it from change. Like, not a sort of conservative way of like, keep things as they exactly are. Nothing is allowed to progress. But in a sense of like, no one is allowed to fuck with time. Because fucking with time can have drastic consequences. Cough, cough, time war. Cough, cough, war in heaven, if you want to get into that shit. Where the entire point of that is there's a faction called the faction grandfather paradox. In order to, like, you have to go back in time and kill your grandfather in order to be allowed entry into this, like, cult, essentially. Like, you have to yourself become a paradox in order to join. It's really fucked up weird shit. But yeah, so interventionist, non-interventionist. Morbius was one of, if not the most aggressively prominent interventionist. His entire thing was like, we are Time Lords, we are the masters of time, like, we should take advantage of that, like, we should rule the universe, like, conquer it all, this is ours for the taking. And he was a very good speaker, and a lot of people listened to him, and he had a lot of followers, and the Time Lords were like, we need to do something about this, because he is possibly going to destroy the universe going about this way. And so, yes, that's how we lead into here. The Time Lords have pushed the Doctor's TARDIS in this direction towards this time and this place, because they're like, ah, shit, he's coming back, isn't he? We'll send the Doctor to deal with him. I'm sure he'll be fine. But yes, that's Morbius. Morbius is a character who I like when he isn't actually there. I prefer that he's the kind of character where I like the after effects of the character rather than, you know, interacting with the character themselves. But yeah, this is sort of fascinating to me to think about, like, this era of, like, body horror and the horrors of, like, transplants and, like, is it still you if your heart is someone else's heart? Like, is that still you? Like, that sort of thing is a little bit more prominent in these minds. And it's the sort of, like, what is the self? Like, what is my identity? Whereas, like, you go back to the 60s with things like the Faceless Ones, where, like, it's more about identity as a whole of, like, what is a person? Who am I? Like, how does someone steal my identity? Like, can someone, like, just, like, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, like, 60s style, like, Soviet sort of fear of, like, anyone could be anything, and, like, someone could steal my place, steal me. Whereas this is more medical and more zooming in more of, like, okay, I am me, obviously, but what makes up me? Like, that sort of thing. So it's like changing of the times, in a sense. But that's where this comes from. It's also worth noting as well that the whole... there's a weird line that they have in this, which makes sense because of the quote-unquote science that they're talking about, but actually makes no sense whatsoever. They note that, like, hey, why don't we just put Morbius's brain in Sarah? And they're like, the female brain case is not big enough to contain my intellect. And it's like, the sort of idea that, like, women's brains are different shapes to male brains, and it's like, that's a science that...
it's a slippery slope.
And I think it's called, like, anthropometry. I never knew how to pronounce it, but it's like, it's the kind of science where it's like, you are one step away from eugenics. Let's not, okay? It's not a real science. It is a... Oh, hang on. Oh, there we go. Sorry, Audacity froze for a second. It is not a real science. It is purely a pseudoscience that is based on just conjecture and not based in the scientific method at all. It's complete bullshit. So don't worry about that. But yeah, what happens in the final part, dear?
So you remember how Sarah was blind?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, she could see again, and the first thing she sees is the testicle.
She's blind. But now she can see
the testicle. It
amazing nuts.
Though it drops over a candlestick, setting itself and the table on fire while Sarah runs off. Igor leaves the doctor's body, and Sarah's like, "Bro, they put this brain on a weird testicle." And too bad the testicle just kills Frank outright and leaves. Testicle. Morbius at this point, basically. We'll just keep calling him Testicle. Knocks out the doctor, keeps attacking the fuck out of Sarah before Igor saves her, but Igor also gets killed. That sucks. Actually, Frank isn't dead. He goes and grabs a needle and a shot or something. Sarah is rested on the table. Frank now has a dart gun, along with the doctor, to hunt the testicle down, but he's walked his way to the Fire Sisters and is now chasing after them. He even kills a fire lady that the doctor found dead. So let's continue to follow him. The doctor gets attacked, Frank shoots, his needle stops it, doctor wants to steal the brain and return it to the Time Lords. Fire Sisters learn about the dead girl. Frank is asked to disconnect the brain, and the doctor goes to talk to Sarah, who thought it was a dream. And then the doctor and Sarah are locked in a basement, and Frank does repairs on the brain, basically saying fuck you to everybody. Fire Girls are arguing about doing anything, all of this episode, at all, to help. And the doctor decides to use some acid to pour on the air ducts into the lab to whatever. It hasn't really worked, even though the upstairs room is actually full of smoke. Frank dies, Testicle's walking around, and actually is now intelligent, so Morbius is alive, basically. All of the Fire Girls are now walking their way through, like, some fucking white dudes in Georgia, and he is very excited to be... Yeah, that was a deep cut there. He was excited to be alive. Listen, they're holding torches. But they just make fun of him and run around the room. So the doctor decides to have a mental wrestling game with him while we stare at some images of the doctor. But of course the testicle short circuits during the process, and the doctor also falls over. Sarah, once again, for the millionth time, thinks the doctor is dying, while the Fire Girls chase the testicle off a cliff. Sarah has some of the elixir left, so they give it to the doctor instead of Leader Lady, and she decides to die. Doctor is, of course, punched in the face by it, and we turn to the old lady dying in the fire. She just kind of dies, and she's in the fire of life. I don't really. It's whatever. Anyway, don't worry about that because Sarah and the Doctor jump into TARDIS and fuck off in like the swoosh way. No big deal.
The zhuzh way. Le zhuzhi.
Yep.
So real quick, we need to talk about it because it's kind of controversial, and it creates a weird point of contention within Doctor Who.
What's up?
So, when they're doing the mental battle, or as you called it, like mental wrestling, well, they called it that too. Well, when he described it to Sarah, they show images that are implied to be past incarnations of the Doctor. First of all, meta fun fact here, those images are just pictures of the production crew, including the production unit manager, Robert Holmes, the script editor, Graham Harper, the production assistant, Douglas Camfield, the director, Philip Hinchcliffe, the producer, Christopher Baker, production assistant, and a few others, some writers, and also Christopher Barry, the director. Yeah, those are the faces. They're implied to be past incarnations of the Doctor, which makes no sense when you think about it in terms of, okay, if these are past incarnations of the Doctor, then that means this isn't the fourth Doctor. There are people before this, and then you're like, wait a minute, they have a strict limit of 13 lives. How the hell does the Doctor regenerate more than this? So basically, the rest of the show ignores that this exists and kind of is just like, it's not past incarnations of the Doctor, it's, I don't know, something else. Don't think about it. Philip Hinchcliffe was not really a fan of people ignoring this because he sort of goes on record saying in a video that he made that the original intention of the faces were to represent previous incarnations of the Doctor, but fans at the time chose to ignore this but still pick up on the 13 incarnations limit, which comes into play a few serials later. He went on to say that no matter how many Who fans say these are mind battle faces or past incarnations of Morbius, it doesn't matter, followed by him stating that he played the Doctor. Because, you know, some people have tried to rationalize it away as like, these are just faces that they created, or like these are actually Morbius's past incarnations, not the Doctor's. It's like, it doesn't matter. The show itself, however, decides to try and provide an actual explanation for this in the new series, and we're not talking about it here because I'm not getting into a rant about the timeless child. That comes in 2023, when, well, actually, it'll probably be 2024 when we get to the Timeless Child. But that, yeah, they try to do that. So that's what that is. It's very weird, considering the rest of the show. But, yeah, that's what that is. Anyway.
Yeah.
What do you think of the brain of Morbius, dear? What do you think of his big, large, juicy brain?
Like a 5-ish. It wasn't great. I mean, it wasn't terrible, but it was just kind of, it's whatever.
Okay, secondary question. This, I personally think this episode, as much as I like it, I feel like it would have been better if it was a little bit more camp and cheesy. Like, if they went, like, overboard with the whole it's literally Frankenstein kind of deal of like, you know, the guy playing like Soren as Frankenstein is just like over the top evil and like maniacal laughter of like to the point where it is just pure cheese of like I am the evil Frankenstein, and you have like Morbius walking around like Frankenstein. I feel like it would have been far more entertaining.
You mean Frankenstein's monster?
No, as Frankenstein, just walking around normally. No, as Frankenstein's monster. Yes. Frankenstein's monster was actually the name of the scientist. I'll have you know.
Oh.
The monster was named Frankenstein's monster's monster.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But yeah, personally, I would have found it a lot more entertaining.
I don't know.
Especially considering how campy and cheesy Doctor Who does get, especially in the 80s. It's like, oh man. it could have been a lot better, but I still like it for what it is.
It's one of those things that it's hard for me to imagine without it being there, which is funny because that's literally my job, but it's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, my job is to be Frankenstein's monster, so I understand it from that perspective as well.
Yeah.
But that's the Brain of Morbius. It is... a quick note, Morbius does come back in some other things, even though he's technically dead. He comes back in a novel, which I believe is meant to be if I remember right, it's a prequel. It stars the Fifth Doctor and a companion or two of his. I've never read it. I've heard it's pretty good. He also comes back in an audio adventure for the Eighth Doctor, which personally I listened to, and I was like, wow, this is not that good. That's weird. I was not a fan of I was a fan of the first part, because Lucy Miller is a great companion. Think Donna Noble, but more vulgar. More vulgar. She's great. Lucy Miller's great. But the second episode of it is just... it weirdly rushes around things, and the episode just feels so weirdly dumb. Also, the consequences of it, I'm like, really? Okay, whatever. But he comes back in that, and it's like, okay, give us... Morbius is more interesting when it's like the threat of Morbius rather than Morbius himself. Like, I find the actual character of Morbius to be less interesting than those that are influenced by him. That's far more interesting to me. But the Sisterhood of Carnagrate, they come back quite a bit and are staples of the lore. They are essentially like... we kind of glossed over them, but they are like equals to the Time Lords in a sense. They do... They sort of, instead of the Time Lords going to more science, the Sisterhood of Khan are more mystical, and it's kind of portrayed that way. Like with the Doctor saying like, oh, the problem with your fire is just that there's like a blockage in the pipe, and they're like, no, it's magic, and he's like, just give me a fucking give me like an iron pipe, and I can just like fucking poke the steam out, essentially. And yeah, that's their shtick. They do come back, and they're kind of a thing, but they're very separate. But we're getting little glimpses here of lore and shit, of universes and people in it and stuff. We get a lot more in a few more episodes' time, but this is where stuff starts ramping up with the world building. But that's it for this episode. Okay, dear.
Yeah.
Next episode is 4 words long. The Blank of Doom.
Rise.
The Rise of Doom?
Mm-hmm.
No. It's a noun.
We did seeds, right, already?
No, that's what it is. The one we did prior was the Seeds of Death. This is the Seeds of Doom.
God damn
I constantly mix the two up, because why the fuck would you have 2 episodes named very similarly? And then you realize, oh, they were made 10 years apart, so I guess it kind of makes sense. But it's
dumb.
It doesn't have Ice Warriors in it, though.
Okay. I'll give it a pass.
Don't worry. Instead, it has environmental messaging. Anyway.
Instead, it has environmental messaging.
Although not really. Kind of, its audio sequel has more of an environmental message to it. But there is some behind-the-scenes drama of it, where the director absolutely kind of stormed off after the filming this and was like, I'm not fucking working on this show ever again.
Yeah.
Because he and Tom Baker did not get along.
We'll get to that.
At all.
We'll get to that.
Tom Baker is kind of hard to work with.
We'll get to that.
But that's the next episode. The Seeds of Doom. Wait, Doom or Death? Doom. Seeds of Doom. I already fucking mixed it up again. The Seeds of Doom. Good luck